this challenge review, we're going to add the moss flip functionality. So to get started, we need a reference to our moss sprite. So we're going to create a variable to store that. So sprite renderer and then moss sprite. From here, we're going to go into void start, and we now need to find that object and get the component. We're on the parent object, so we need to say moss sprite is going to equal get component in children, and we're going to grab the sprite renderer off the child object. That is our moss sprite. Once we have access to our moss sprite, we can then come down here into our movement, and where we say if transform.position equals point.a.position, what do we want to do? We want to say anim.setTrigger, and then here we can flip us. So we could say moss sprite dot flipx equals false if we're going to point B, and true if we're going to point A. So here, moss sprite dot flipx equals true. Now, like I've mentioned in the past, as you begin programming more and more, you're going to be able to foreshadow results. And I don't believe this is going to give us the result we want. What's going to happen here is we're going to play our idle animation, which is great, but we're going to flip during the idle animation or before the idle animation. And that's not what we want. We actually want the idle animation to finish and then flip. So where does this logic need to be? So here we perform our idle, and we go to position B. And once that target is reached, let's see what happens. Are we going to flip first or idle? And as you can see here, we flipped first and then idle. That is not the desired behavior. We want to idle first and then flip. So how can we do that? Well, this is a simple logic error. Let's go into our Moss Giant script. And you can see here that we are telling it to do both, play idle and flip at the same time. That's not what we want to do. We know that this moss sprite flipx code is halted because this whole movement code is halted when it's idling. So one of the things that we can do here is we can actually check immediately after an update here. We can say if current target equals point A dot B, or I'm sorry, point A dot position, then what do we want to do? If current target is equal to point A dot position, what should we be facing? We should ideally be facing to the left, right? So if current target equals point A dot position, that means we're coming left. So we want to go ahead and say moss sprite dot flipx, and that's going to be true because we're coming from the right. So if point A is the target, that means we're coming from the right. So moss sprite dot flipx is true. Else, we can just simply say moss sprite dot flipx equals false. And ideally, we also could probably take this code and we can just actually simply place it into the movement, and you can place it right here. We could say if current target, and that should also work just fine because this gets halted anyways during the movement. None of this code happens while our idle is animating, so this would occur afterwards. So let's go ahead and check this out. Now we could also run into some issues with this, but we'll see. Because now technically the same result's going to happen where we're actually telling it to possibly flip before animating, logically. So we may actually need to isolate this from the movement method and keep it in update. Let's see though. So we're going to do our idle. We're going to move to point B. And it looks like I think we're going to have the same logic error. So we actually do need to move that code into update. And actually, it looks okay. Perfect. Oh, never mind then. That's exactly what we want. And we move to point A. We idle. Alrighty, and we're good to go. I'll see you guys in the next video.